Hi everyone, so today I have a pretty quick video for you and I'm going to be doing the Big Books tag. This tag was first originally created by One Book, One Review, and I'll leave a link to their channel down below. So this is a pretty simple tag. Basically you have to pick the biggest 5 books on your bookshelf that you've read and talk about them, and the 2 biggest books that you haven't read. So I kind of cheated a little bit because a lot of my books would have been Brandon Sanderson books had I not branched out a bit further, so I've picked 5 books, each by a different author. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with the shortest book on my list and work my way up to the longest. So the first book I have, clocking in at a whopping 925 pages, is One Cute A4 by Haruki Murakami. I believe in Japan this was actually published as 3 separate novels, but this is awesome. This is a brick of a novel that's kind of like this dystopian, magical, weird, if you've read Murakami, it's very Murakami-esque. And it's funny because the Japanese word Q actually is the number 9, so it's actually 1984 if you pronounce it. So I think that that's a very interesting take. I absolutely loved this novel. It is, like, this is a weapon though. Like, it is heavy. I would say if you want to start getting into Murakami, this probably isn't the first book you should pick up because it's quite convoluted. There's a lot happening in here. There's kind of a mystery going on and a bit of a thriller, and it's just all over the place. If you like Murakami and have read a few of his books already, totally recommend you pick this one up. Alright, so next up, clocking in at 973 pages, is A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I binge read the first 4 books in this series a few years ago now, intending to watch the TV show, and then I never watched the TV show, and I probably will never watch the TV show. I might, but I did really enjoy my time reading these books, but man, they are huge. From what I remember, because I think it was at least 3, probably 4 years ago when I read this one was actually my favorite of the 4 that I read. I remember absolutely flying through this book, even though it is nearing in on 1,000 pages. Again, as I said, I've only seen a few episodes of the first season of the TV show, so I'm not too familiar with it. But this book, so action-packed and just crazy and brutal. Really enjoyed what I read of this series. I probably will read the 5th book soon, and maybe someday if George R.R. Martin finishes the series, I will continue on. So the 3rd book on my list is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I adore this series. There's only 2 books out. A 3rd one is coming someday, apparently. But the King Hurler Chronicles is just some of the most cleverly written fantasy I've ever read. I absolutely adore it. It is the story of Quoth, who is orphaned as a young child and kind of makes his way through life on his own and ends up going to this like magical university, which is always an awesome setting. Quoth is such a cool character, and he is actually telling his own story to a chronicler in these books. So he kind of flashes back to his life as an older man, as an innkeeper, as he's telling these stories. The first book is the day 1 of him telling a story, the 2nd book is day 2 of him telling the story, and the 3rd book will be day 3 of him telling his life story. I know these books look intimidating because this book comes in at exactly 1,000 pages long, but they are just so good. If you like fantasy, pick them up, you will not regret it. The next book on my list comes in at 1,006 pages, and that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is the only book on my list that sadly I didn't love. I only read this last year, and I found it to be quite dry. It feels like a historical fiction novel. It's set in 1806 in London, and that's great. That's a great setting. I'm okay with that, but it just felt like this is a book about kind of warring magicians, but it doesn't feel magical, which is kind of what I was missing from this. I know a lot of people absolutely love this book, and I can appreciate that. Fortunately, it wasn't my cup of tea. I did get through it though, and that's pretty good for a 1,006 page book. The longest book that I have read that I'm putting on this list comes in at 1,243 pages as a tall hardcover, and that is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said, Brandon Sanderson books tend to be on the longer side. This is the longest of his books ever, I do believe. and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's book 3 of the Stormlight Archive. I love the Stormlight Archive. I think it is a fantastic fantasy series. I don't think it's for people who haven't read that much fantasy, as it is very involved, but if you love adult high fantasy, dive in, because it is so worth it. Again, this is the 3rd book. This just came out last year, so it's going to be a few years till we get book number 4, and I'm hoping it'll be even longer, but this is just such an amazing book. If you like fantasy, dive on it. The 2 longest books I have on my TBR shelf, I don't actually have them with me because my backpack was heavy this morning carrying those 5 books here alone. But the 2nd biggest book I have on my TBR is Dr. Sleep by Stephen King. This is actually the 2nd book in the Shining series. I haven't read The Shining yet, so I can't read Dr. Sleep yet, but I found a really nice edition of the hardcover at the thrift store for $1, so I bought it because I do want to read The Shining. So I believe that is the 2nd longest book on my TBR. So the longest book on my TBR is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I started reading this book probably 3 years ago, and it's still currently reading on my Goodreads shelf, and I think I'm 15% through the book, and my edition is 1,273 pages long. I do intend on finishing this book someday. I haven't made any progress on it in probably a year. It's quite dense. Might try to switch over to an audiobook or something with this one, because I do want to read it. It's on my bucket list, but I just haven't got all the way through, but I made a start, and I think that is definitely the longest unread book I have. Alright, so that was the big books tag. Let me know some of the longest books that you've read down in the comments. I'm very curious. I love reading long books. I do not find them intimidating most of the time. And I just love getting so immersed in the story that I can hold on to for a really long time. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. Happy reading and thanks for being awesome. Bye!